Thank you for joining. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to the session, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of Wilfin Meninges, we welcome you in this session on why is the oldest women's peace organization mobilizing men in feminist peace. We have amazing speakers lined up, as you may know, and we will be introducing each one of them as we move forward. So before we start, we wanted to request you to select a language. There are simultaneous translations happening at the moment in 3 different languages, Spanish, English, and French. And you will see a small globe button on the bottom of your screen. So you have to select your language of preference there so that you can constantly hear the same language. So before we jump on, please do that right now so that you can continue hearing in the same language in 3 different languages at the moment. In addition to that, we are also using other languages interpretation through an app called Wordly. In order for you to access that, you will see this custom live streaming services button on the top of your screen. If you click there, you need then click on from the drop-down menu, view stream on custom live streaming services, then it will take you to Wordly. And Wordly also provides, and this is how the screen should look like. This is Zoom screen. You can adjust as you feel comfortable in your screen. And on here in Wordly, you can select the language from this button and select the language where it's automatically translated. It is not perfect automatic translation, but it kind of helps you to understand the gist of the conversation. These are the languages that currently Wordly functions. These are 18 different languages. So also follow us on social media with this hashtag Ubuntu Symposium or Symposia Ubuntu in Spanish, and join us there as well. So before we start, we wanted to start with this video.
Hegemonic masculinity is behind everything which threatens the planet and threatens our solidarity.
We need to focus on understanding how the rhetoric, the social psyche of masculinity in this way.
To find the common cause that our sisters who started this work would trust enough that men could come in and be part of the gender justice struggle.
Only way to do it would be to engage with political leadership and convince them that they need to change the law.
It's not only talking about political work and political awareness, it's about inner transformation.
Clearly, change is possible, and we should hold on to our optimism.
I wanted to act as if the house was on fire, because it is.
Thank you. Over to you, Madeline.
I think that is so beautiful. I love that introduction. And actually what's really interesting is you think of it, the question, why has it taken over 100 years for the WILF to actually embrace the whole concept of men engaged? You think, if you look at that, 100 years ago, we weren't ready for that. We had not come to the stage where we really understood what it is about gender. And I think that this is the evolution of the process. Because 1915, you think those 1,300 women who came together in The Hague, they couldn't even vote. So what they were looking at was a completely male-dominated world where colonialism was the norm, militarization of populations, it was all very masculine. And so for the women of 1915, the problem was men. And there was a presumption that equality and the right to vote would lead to change. But fast forward, and now we do have this gender analysis. We have seen how patriarchy is rooted in our cultures, that a binary narrative exists of gender, which upholds it. And as Cynthia Cockburn, that brilliant architect of so many of the thinking, the thoughts that we have and the vision we have at WILF, she identified gender relations as being causal of conflict. And so we learn and we progress. And I think this is one of the reasons why we've been able to really embrace the need to reposition how we are as an organization. So by looking at women in power structures, you can see that, you know, if you have power structures still based on militarism, still based on capitalism, which lead to inequalities, then we're not going to have the change that we need. And I think the recognition of this fabulous diversity that we have, which is inherent in our understanding of gender and its possibilities, is the way forward, which is why we embrace completely the need to work with all people and reframe the discussion so it is not men against women, it is we against structures which are inimical to us being able to have the sort of sustainable peace that we want. And just a quick example, if you look at last Friday, the treaty banning nuclear weapons came into force. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it was brought about by a fabulous coalition of feminists, of queer, of LGBT thinking that made imagining the ending of, or banning nuclear weapons a possibility. They did it differently and it worked. And we have a treaty. So I think, you know, if you think it's 100 years, we embraced Men Engage, or they embraced us in 2015, really. And that was our 100th anniversary. And, you know, no small feat on their behalf. Not an easy crowd to walk into and be with. You've got all these feminists from all around the world who have been used to engaging separately, but they came and their support was amazing. We'd never done it before. No one had ever done that before in the same way. And it was our anniversary, you know, it was 100 years of WILF. And there they were, and it was fabulous. And at the end, I remember I said that if I would go on their board, if they would have me, sort of like an engagement, really. So they did come back and they did have me on the board, and WILF is on the board now. And so it's an engagement of the like-minded. And we recognize there are difficulties and travails on the way, which we need to identify and live with. But we will overcome them as long as we hold on to that thought that we are no longer needed to play the roles that culture has assigned to us, and we could do things differently. So I'm really, really looking forward to this discussion. We have an amazing panel, and to frame it, we're going to have Cynthia Earnlow, the renowned scholar and the best person ever at explaining how inequalities and gender works, and militarism. Absolutely, this is what we want you to be addressing, Cynthia, in your presentation. And I'm sure no need to introduce Lema Bowie, the Nobel laureate, who has done so much to bring peace, not just to Liberia, but in all the work that she has been doing subsequent to that, a voice for the feminist movement in REM, I think. So Cynthia, over to you first of all. Can you talk to us a little more about how we get to militarized masculinities? What is it? Explain it to us.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Lashman. Hi, Madeline and Sylvie and Jamila and Annie and Deanna and all the people who are taking part. This is an amazing convocation. And I'd like to pick up on what Madeline started off with, which is our combined, all of you, effort to understand how patriarchy works. Patriarchy is a particular culture. It's not just a structure, it's a culture. It's a set of presumptions, a set of prides, a set of fears, a set of comforts. Patriarchy offers a lot of comfort to a lot of people. And for Menengage and Wilf, two sets of activists who both are committed to pursuing justice, pursuing peace, pursuing fairness, pursuing genuine security. Facing patriarchy together means understanding it together. And that will require all the kind of grassroots, hard, day-to-day, stamina-demanding sorts of activism that Menengage activists and Wilp activists specialize in. If there's one thing that binds us all together, it's stamina. That is day in, day out. And one of the things I think we've learned is that the kinds of masculinities that sustain, that hold up, that are a pillar, not the only pillar, but a pillar of sustaining very flexible, very updatable patriarchy. Patriarchy isn't stuck in the past. Patriarchy is as hip as a black t-shirt. All right? Patriarchy is as hip as the next new thing. And one of the things that holds it up is not just a single kind of masculinity, but multiple masculinities. So that when we do our grassroots work and engage with each other and try to figure out how patriarchy works in each of our own communities, they will not be the same in Colombia as they are in Cameroon. They're not the same as in the US as they are in South Africa. So you have to be constantly curious. And the kinds of masculinities that uphold and sustain and update patriarchy are multiple. It's not just the combat soldier. It is not just the pinstripe banker. It is not just the tyrannical father. Patriarchy takes the form of claiming expertise and not listening to women. Patriarchy takes the form of being the expert when in fact one should be the learner. Patriarchy takes the form of being the specialist with technical knowledge, for instance, about how to dismantle an M16 rifle, and therefore claiming you know more about the gun trade than anybody who doesn't know how to dismantle an M16 rifle. I've heard men do that as if they know more about the gun trade because they know they're comfortable with dismantling a rifle. You can be a militarized man anytime you fear being called a woman. One of the reasons why anybody who is trying to challenge patriarchy has to understand women's lives and women's experiences and women's ideas, which means listening, is that masculinity is held up by, that's another pillar here, can't do my pillars, is many men's fear of being feminized. It's one of the reasons why to do effective work with men and boys, you have to be a feminist. That is, you have to know why men and boys are taught, they're not born with this, are taught to be afraid of being called a girl or a sissy, or however that translates into your local language. That fear of being called a girl only works if there's a patriarchy which denigrates anything feminine. Let me do that again. Patriarchy depends on boys and men being afraid of being called a girl, because patriarchy denigrates, dismisses, marginalizes, ridicules anything that is feminine. So to do effective work with men and boys, you have to listen to feminists because they know how the feminine, anybody who's feminized, being called soft, being called emotional, being called naive, especially naive, is wielded against boys and men. And you have to listen to feminists to do that. We're still learning, all of us who are feminists. We aren't at the end of our learning. We're still learning. And in fact, I'm going to be listening really carefully this morning, probably even taking notes, because I'm still a learner.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. Great. I think what a start. And definitely agree that, any work with men and boys needs to be feminist informed and starts with listening to feminist leaders and movements. And I think this is very, very particular in the context where there is so much intensified patriarchal backlash and gender conservatism at the moment in many of the parts of the world where we are working right now. So that's what, we do need to disrupt patriarchy and transform the relationships of power. In addition to the work, we also need to work with men and boys in a way. And then also, with this talk around what this project actually on challenging the militarized masculinities works around also has to be connected with both social norms, but also political economy, as you rightly said. And feminist activists and scholars continue to note the ways in which this nationalistic rhetoric of control and protection is both masculinized and militarized. Nationalism, militarism, and patriarchal masculinity has always been closely linked. And that's shaping the world order right now that we see around us, which is hugely problematic. And I think identifying and discussing the forces behind political economy, and we all need to sort of guard men claiming particular analytical expertise and situating them as experts. Absolutely to the point. And that is absolutely crucial and key in the work that we are doing on transforming masculinities and working with men and boys in the quest for gender equality and feminist peace. So with that, I would like to then invite Lema to give her remarks. And we all know Lema, a Nobel Peace Laureate, is a Liberian peace activist, trained social worker, and women's rights advocate. She is the founder and current president of GOWI, sorry if I mispronounced that, Peace Foundation Africa, and founder of GOWI Peace Foundation Africa USA as well. She currently serves as the executive director of Women, Peace and Security Program at Columbia University Earth Institute. So, Lema, we wanted to bring you in just to build on that and share your experiences around what did militarized masculinities look like in Liberia during the Civil War, and how, under your leadership and the broader women's movement, worked in hands together with men and boys as well. And how do you view the question of engaging boys and men in this work?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me well. I'm really on pins and needles, hoping that my internet doesn't misbehave as we go through. Can everyone hear me well? So I usually like to start with real life examples and stories. A few years back, way before we started the mass action campaign, I worked as a case worker with child soldiers. And in those days, the stories of rape and abuse were alarming. And I, in my quest to understand the minds of these young boys, wanted to know from them what their thoughts were. So I'm in a room filled with 16-year-old child soldiers who started fighting at the age of 10, some 8, some were 15, 14. And my question to them was, did you all ever rape anyone during the war? And they all said no. So I thought they didn't answer the question. I said, did you all ever use your gun to force any woman to have sex with? And they said, oh, that's what you're talking about. Yes, yes, yes. And I said, but that's rape. They said, no, but isn't that what women are made for? So in their minds, sex is a natural process, regardless of if it is forced or if it is coerced or if violence took place. There was nothing wrong with it. That, in my mind, made me to think, what is it that we have in our societies that is creating this mindset? Well, I assume that it was the war mentality. Several years later, I'm in Ghana and I had never seen war. And I asked a group of, my daughter went to school and came back and said, oh, today I went to do International Women's Day and the boys told me to shut up and sit down, that women were only good for making babies and cooking. And in my mind, I said to myself, if you put guns in those boys' hands, they will do the same thing. That's the first part, and I would like to pack that to come back to it. But if we are to think back at the way people think and feel about women and the work that we've been doing in Liberia or all around the world, one of the things that I was confronted with is beyond the attitude of knowing it all that Cynthia talked about, is the attitude of we are the ones who are strategic, and you have no strategy to confront violence, and you have no strategy to deal with war. So when we were protesting, we were persistently, because women know their communities, they know the environment, they know the fighters, and they even know the strategies of dealing with these people. So during the war years in Liberia, immediately in 2003, when they were about to do disarmament, we sat down by ourselves and said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is the way to go. And they said to us, no. And at that time, it was Jack Paul Klein, who came from the US and who knew all about everything and was not going to pay attention to anything we had to say. So they first started with the awareness around disarmament and demobilization. And this awareness took the form of flying over villages and dropping flyers to people who could not read English. We wrote them and said, this is the wrong process. When we went for the first day of disarmament, which was supposed to be symbolic, where they were supposed to disarm maybe 100 people, 3,000 fighters showed up. So one of the things that we did after, everyone knows how that story ended, one of the things that we did immediately after was, the way we will confront this kind of masculinity is to invade their spaces with our strategy. So we invaded their spaces. First thing Monday morning, he went to work, the women went and said, you will not pass until you listen to us. You have to listen because we have the strategy. We know exactly what we want and how we want this to be done. So that, when Cynthia talks about we don't know it all, yes, no one claims to know it all, but I think one of the ways to deal with this is collaboration between the women, between the men, regardless of who's wearing uniform. In these communities, it doesn't matter if you're holding gun or not. The women have some of the answers for the work that is being done. The other thing that we had to deal with was the soldiers who came from different cultural background, who came with only a military mindset, but who were also very afraid that they did not come to die in Liberia. Some of them, especially the ones from West Africa, were very much willing to engage with us. So we dealt with that, and like I said, invading their spaces and coming in with your own strategy to say, this is how we think this should work. The other thing is, when you come to the question about how do you engage men and boys, I think it's an important question, and I can sit here and give you tons of stories. But I think the first thing, the importance of engaging men and boys, is the misconception about feminism, the misconception about a feministic way of doing things. In November, I was privileged to be at a leadership conference for young people in West Africa. These are supposed to be the next generation political leaders in our sub-region. And the first question to me was, because my bio always read, I'm a feminist, no if, no but, no whatever. But I went with my husband to this conference, and the first question I was asked was, how is it that you're a feminist and you have a husband when you all are supposed to hate men and everything about men? So the entire conversation was now not about leadership anymore and the need for embracing women. I had to spend a huge chunk of my time educating them. Like Madeline rightly said, that this is not about men, it is about the structure and those things that enable the attitude that make women to be less than men. So I think the way when we start to engage.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, hopefully she'll come back. I was going to say that she mentioned Jack Paul Klein, would-be master of the universe and everything, and he was so up on his masculinity and trying to demonstrate it in every single way he could. He famously went into Liberia carrying the white stick, which is the symbol of the colonial governor. I had the pleasure of working with him, sort of, in Bosnia. And I thought what she said about, you know, when that disarmament where he kept everyone waiting and he kept it so he could make his entrance, it's just exactly the sort of masculinity, the performance of masculinity, and it just doesn't work. I mean, that's the other thing, it just doesn't work. It's all about show and power, and I think we've just lost the orangutan here. And oh, same thing. Lema, you're back.
But I'm really sad because the internet is giving us trouble. They said there's a problem with the fiber optic cable in Liberia. So, but the point that I would conclude with is that there is a need for dialogue. We cannot stop having conversation with men and boys about feminism, because I think it's the first step. I have many spaces and places where the ignorance is just alarming, it's upsetting. I was in a room with 100 young people, 45 plus boys, and I tilted the conversation around about teenage pregnancy because most times we go at the girls. I wanted to know how many teen fathers were in the room. About 80% of the boys in the room were teen fathers. How did it happen? Some told me, oh, it was just 1 minute. I pulled out. I did this, I did that. And what it dawned on me that we have a whole generation of young people who have no concept, no understanding of feminism, no concept, no understanding of dealing with women's rights issue, no concept, no understanding. And these are the people who are going to sit in our parliament, in our government houses to make laws and pass policies that will affect and impact the lives and the bodies of women. So we need to begin to have those conversations. From our end as women, I think it's important for us to always have our strategies on hand, strategies to invade these spaces. I don't think it's time for us to be shy anymore about what we want, how we want it. We need to be bold about where we find ourselves. When it comes to militarism, we should not agree 100% that it's a man thing. Men make war and they should make peace. Yes, we don't claim to know it all, but I think we know enough about our own lives that we can step into spaces and make decisions about those things that impact and affect our lives. And again, I apologize for the internet connectivity. I'm not president of Liberia, so I can't take no blame for this one.
Not president of Liberia yet. Cynthia, there was so much of what Lema was talking about, which resonates with what you've already said. But that big thing you've always had is that language matters. So I wonder if you want to just engage now with Lema to interrogate that some more.
Lema, what a pleasure. What a pleasure to see you. And I wish we were in the same room together. That'd be fun. One of the things I'm so struck by is you're trying to find out what boys actually imagine. Because the way you engage with boys and men is to let them show what they assume so that we can then engage with that. And I think that's really valuable. I mean, I see it in my own teaching. You know, I have the boys in the back of the room. These are now older teenage boys who put their baseball cap on backwards, you know, and slouch down in their chair. And I like talking to those guys. And I'm just very admiring of the way that you really, if Lema, you can hear me, but to everybody, to amplify what Lema has just been, what Lema you've just been teaching us is be patient, be curious, without judgment, because judgment can be very silencing unless it comes from an arrogant person, and then that's something else again. But let boys and men and girls and women, give them space to say what they assume, even though it's dismaying or even insulting. Give the space, because unless we hear what men and boys and girls and women in all our spaces, we come from all of us today, there are 170 of us now, all of us come from different spaces. We have to, as Lema said, let those assumptions have some airspace so that we can then dismantle those fears or give alternatives to those assumptions. So I'm just very admiring, Lema, of how you do that.
Well, let me just also jump back in, and I'm turning off my camera because I hear it will help me. Can you all hear me? Thumbs up, Maddie, if you hear me. Okay. So beyond allowing them to speak, I think sometimes it's important for us to come from a space and a place where those issues that trouble us, for a lack of a better word, or those issues that are persistently in our faces, we all that tend to hold us back as women, as feminists, we need to do some thorough interrogation. Years back, I worked with a group of pastors. And from the minute we walked in that room, the only thing I could hear was their wives sit home idly doing nothing but eat their money. And I went back and said to them, I need someone to come on the board. How much do you make? $3,000, quote unquote, and I'm just using a figure. So if your wife, what does your wife do? Oh, first thing in the morning, she wakes up and she makes hot water. If you were paying someone to just light fire because you don't have electric stove, how much will you pay? And on and on and on and on, we went down chatting all of the chores and putting $sign to everything that his wife did. And at the end of it, let's do a calculation a day, because it ended with when he came home from work, she fed him his meal. And then my last question was, so when you went to sleep at night, did you just sleep? No, of course I have to touch her. So if you were paying for sex, how much will you pay? All of those things, we went into it. And then we added everything, did addition, calculated it by 30 days or 31 days. And then we put it alongside his salary. And he was looking amazed. And I said, this is how much your wife makes, or this is how much she saves you. But that turned that entire conversation around, because at the end of it all, a lot of them came back and said, let's go deeper into this that you just did, into this work that you just did. And honestly, one of them was like, I'm traumatized. I want to go back home and apologize to my wife, because that's my standard line. That she simply say to her, eat my money and you do nothing. So I think beyond allowing them to speak, sometimes interrogating the mindset, interrogating the thoughts, interrogating the principles at you is very important. But I feel like there's no way we can bring them on board in this work if we do not begin to create spaces for dialogue. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
No, let's continue. We can always bring her back.
Okay. Well, actually, I think we wanted to really have a long dialogue between Cynthia and Lema, and I realized we've already started going outside of the parameters of our very tightly manicured agenda. So because we seem to have lost Leila for the time being in any case, I would propose we move on now. Do we have Sylvie and Jamila? Are you on? Are you here? Are you with us?
Yes, Jamila is here.
then let us move into a conversation with two amazing women. Jamila Afghani, who is the president of the WILF section in Afghanistan and who is doing incredible work on building peace in a very, very difficult situation, as I'm sure you can all imagine. And we also have got with us Sylvie Ngomo, who is also the president of the WILF section, this time in Cameroon, and whose work has been absolutely incredible in surfacing both the gender dimension of the conflicts within and the tensions within Cameroon, as well as bringing it very much into the international forum in a different way. If you're both there, we want to start first of all by showing a short video of the work of Jamila. So if the techie people can make that happen, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
To be honest, the word of feminist is a very sensitive word. In a community or a society like Afghanistan, using that I'm feminist or I'm advancing feminist peace will create lots of reaction and prejudice towards our work. We are using the word of sisterhood and womanhood as a comparative word, which can be like acceptable or tolerable in our society. We are working to change man mindset. So first of all, we are very much conscious that how we are talking, which type of words we are using, what type of language we are using, what type of physical and actions we have. So we consider all these sensitivity. Secondly, we use religion arguments to support our work, working with imams from Islamic perspective. I remember when for the first time I had a training session with imams when we were working on family trees. And I was asking that to write name of male and female member of the family. And I noticed that most of the imam, they were not writing name of their wife, their daughters. So when I was asking that why you do not share the name, they were saying it's very shameful for us. We are Afghan, and how we can share name of our wife, daughter in front of other men. Then I was thinking, oh God, how to work. And then I start presenting my family tree, and I was telling them that this is name of my mother. And I love this name because name of mother of prophet was this. This is my name, and this is my sister name, like Khadija. And I love this name because this is the name of wife of Holy Prophet. So all the imams were realizing something, and I was saying like, the most supreme person in the life of a Muslim is Holy Prophet. And we know the names of wife and daughters of Holy Prophet. And as he was a strong man, he was highly moral man. If he was not feeling embarrassed, ashamed of taking name of his family members, we are superior to Prophet. We are higher in value from Holy Prophet. Then the Imam realized their mistake. Then one of an Imam came in like emotion. He said, my wife name is Fatima, and Fatima is name of daughter of Holy Prophet. So I'm proud of this name. So this type of activity I do, these are the things that slowly and gradually change the mindset. We are also working with women to understand the importance they have in this life and the role they can play in their personal, private, and social level life. Women who are illiterate, who are semi-educated or highly educated. And also we are trying to work with women who are living under the rule of Taliban in almost 60% of our land, who are totally deprived of the basic needs of their life. We are working with youths. They are the ones who are carrying the war, especially male youths. They are easily can be targeted in the clutches of mafia and warlords. So that's why it's very much important to challenge or encounter the terrorism or extremism in our society.
Thank you, and that is an amazing video. We've got another video that we have on our website as well, which I would invite you to look at, where she's talking about, where Jamila talks about participation in the peace processes. I'm going to come back to you in a moment, Jamila, because we want you to engage in conversation with Sylvie, but I want to bring Sylvie in now because both Sylvie and Jamila are engaged in a project that we are doing on militarized masculinities, which is there to surface the work they've been doing on engaging with men and boys. And maybe, Sylvie, could we come to you first of all to say, why do you think it's important and how have you been carrying this forward?
Should I?
Well, I was going to bring Sylvie in, but I think we've sort of lost her. So please, Jamila, yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, first of all, everybody, and thank you for giving me the space to be with you today. When I was very young, when 23 years back, I started my social activity. I opened a school in my own hometown in Ghazni province, which is one of the religious and very man-dominated community. When I opened the school and I invited the young girls of the community to come to my center and start reading, and I found that most of people were not letting their daughter to come to my school. And I was very much concerned that why they are not coming to my center. Then I started doing investigation and talking with different people. I found that one of the imam in a mosque, he's preaching against me, that she is a very bad woman. She's working with men in the office. She's traveling alone outside the country. She's not taking mahram along her side. She is a demoral woman, so you should not allow your children to go to her school. Otherwise, your children will become like her. It was really hard for me to change the situation, but of course I didn't stop. And as I'm also from Ghazni province, and my father was an influential man, so we tried to arrange a meeting with the imam. When the imam came to my office, he was covering his face like that, and he was saying like, such a shameful, the woman I hate, I'm coming to visit her. But due to the consultation of community leaders, that guy was able to come to our center. Then I challenged that imam and I said, okay, my brother, if you can prove that I'm a demoral person and I'm doing something wrong against my religion, against my culture, so just right now, I hand over the keys of my school to your hand and I will come not back again. So just you should tell me with a proof, with a reason that I'm doing something bad or something wrong. I started with reciting the verses of Quran, which the very first verse of Quran is about reading, about writing, swearing, God is swearing upon pen, which is very huge. And after a while, this man realized that my knowledge was better than his knowledge. And the circle of the friends from both sides we had. So the man had not much more argument with me. Then he said, wow, I didn't know that you have this much knowledge about Islam, and I thought totally different about you. Then the guy said, no, I was wrong, this and that. So he promised to help us, and he promised to change his attitude. But of course, I was conscious that he might not change himself, and it's very difficult in a man-dominated society to change mentality of a man in one sitting or two sitting. But of course, I use some other influences through our family and my other friends communicating with this imam again and again. After several meetings, we found this imam was preaching in good words about our work. And believe me, when the man started preaching in good sense about our work, there was no room in our office. It was fully crowded. And there was need to establish more bigger space for including more children in our school. Then I realized the importance of work of a man in a man-dominated society. From that time, I decided to work with community influential leader and to give them the sense that we women are not here to take their power, their position from them. We are here to help them to change our society positively, where they can enjoy a better life, where we can enjoy a better life, where our children can have a better life. And this was a very good example in my work. And even when I start this work with imams, most of civil society and other women activists were talking against me, and they were saying Jamila is doing something very wrong, very bad. But now when I see that Taliban is coming back on the table of negotiation, and they are trying to come back and take power in the system of government, now all of civil society organizations are moving towards imams, towards religious scholars, in order to use their power, their knowledge to convince Taliban, as Taliban are using Sharia or Islamic teaching as a means for their war and peace. So this was a very lengthy answer to a very small question. I hope it's enough. I will be here if there is any other question.
It's amazing how you managed to condense an incredible amount of work into just a short intervention. But I mean, that's just a fabulous example, dismantling patriarchy one conversation at a time with the people that you need to work with. We'll come back. I was almost going to call you Jackie, Sylvie, because that's the name that came up on your screen. Sylvie, can you tell us a little more about why and how you're engaging in men in a very very different set of circumstances than the one that exists in Afghanistan, in Cameroon, that is. You there, Sylvie?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
It's breaking, Sylvie, but we can hear your voice.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope I will not be. Yeah, good. Thank you so much. Yes, I want to say that. Okay. I want to say that our experiences with working with things. First, some research that we have been able to carry out. Secondly, some concerns that we have. Thirdly, some principles and some facts. when I want to talk about the first which are the research that we are carrying out, I want to mention the research that we did in 2016 to help Cameroon we conducted this research to outline the impact of conflict on women and girls, to help the government of Cameroon to outline the focus area of the action plan. We also conducted in 2009.
I think we've lost Sylvie again, have we?
Looks like that, yeah.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Sometimes she gets a very good line, sometimes obviously not. Well, while we're waiting for, hopefully, Sylvie to be able to rejoin us, Jamila, can I come back to you? And I want you to consider if you've got any, the work you're doing, the work you're engaged in, you have built an incredible movement in Afghanistan. There's some 10,000 involved with the peace work now through Wealth. And I think it's about 30% are men. Is that right? Yeah. I just wonder, do you have any ambivalence about actually the way in which you are engaging with men? Is there any conflicts that you see within that? Are there any tensions within that, building a movement which is now very much engaging with men?
Yes, it's really challenging, Madeleine. One of the major challenge we have in Afghanistan, it is like utilization of religion by the most patriarchal man or in a man-dominated society. We have two huge issues which are coming together and helping or shaping the political scenario of our daily life. Misuse of religion and misuse of religion, which is giving a shape to our culture and to our custom. It is very strong in our society. I'm sure that most of the friends are aware about the current peace negotiation with Taliban and the conflict with Taliban. It is really difficult to convince men in our society. Almost for the past 40 years, we are in conflict. And one of the understanding in our society is that the Russian was defeated in Afghanistan because of the strength of religion, the use of religion they used to mobilize people in our society. So with that mindset, the man, the young, the generations are coming that they have the supremacy of religion and they are moving towards more militarization. And it has created a big distraction in our society. And it is a big challenge. When I'm talking about peaceful ways of Islam, when we are working with peaceful lessons from the life of Holy Prophet in order to change the man mindset in our society, I'm blamed to be introducing a new Islam to society from those who are having very political power with pushing their own political agenda. We are a challenge for them. We are a challenge for them. That's why I'm getting lots of threats, and sometimes, most of the time, my life is in danger. Sometimes I feel like I have no place to go because sometimes civil society thinks that I'm doing more of religious activity. And from the other side, those who are using religion for their political gains, they are saying that I'm bringing more moderation in the teaching of religion. So it's very difficult for me, and it will be a difficult task ahead of us as long we are working. But as I said before in my video clip, we are using very localized methods. We are trying to keep the common understanding of people. We are using the common language that people are saying. And we are using those local tools to convince common people to understand the situation. Recently, with support of WILF and Norway, we inaugurated a book launch ceremony in which we introduced hundreds of stories of war and peace by women, which has positive and also very painful stories of women who are suffering from these conflicts. And it had a huge impact. And I have received lots of good messages from everyone. And even during our meeting last year with Taliban and Qatar, everybody was developed a piece of paper and they were reciting their papers. But I told Taliban a real story of a family who suffered from the useless fight which is going on, the multiple damage that family suffered, their children, their husband, the women in that family. So that story made everybody to cry. And even Taliban start crying. And they were cleaning their eyes with their side of turban. So I think we have the power, we have the knowledge, we have the experience to work in our society. But of course, it's not easy and it will be very challenging. And another challenge is competition among women activists on the ground, because usually it is also very difficult to have a unified solidarity among different groups of women working on the ground. But hopefully we can change the situation slowly and gradually, as we all are talking, Lema, Satya, you, we all, that it's not an easy job. It's a long journey ahead of us, and we have to walk slowly, strategically, and supporting each other.
Thank you, Jamila. I mean, that's really, it's so important, I think, to what you're doing is exposing there is such a thing as a common humanity. You've just got to find the way of getting behind that performance that so many people, including women, as you've so rightly said, will actually hide behind. And if we can just put that veil away, then we can hopefully build that peace that you're working for. Laxman, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, it's amazing work, and it's sad that we are not able to hear or have Sylvie join back. Looks like she's having some issues with the internet. But moving on, we'll give her some time when she joins back in. So, absolutely building on to what Jamila also said, there is some anxiety around the work that has been going on with boys and men because of various obvious reasons as well. But also in looking at it from a systems perspective, the gender binary has been set up in such a way that it is always put in context of one versus the other, and the system on in itself creates that phenomena through which we start seeing each other as competitors or people who don't try to understand. But I think with this partnership, what we are trying to also unpack is that there is possibility for meaningful engagement and partnership with those who are working and leading the work on feminist movement, but also working on with boys and men in transforming masculinities. So, but yeah, it's always a bumpy road, as in the beginning Madeline said. But we are, sort of committed to sort of dismantle that system that always brings this problem in the center and then keeps us dividing, and sort of blocks us to be the true human beings who we are. And that would require more looking into pragmatic elements. So for that, we wanted to invite Diana and Annie to join the conversation with us here as well. So Diana is a political scientist from Limpal, Colombia, which is Limpal is the Spanish translation of WILF. And she's the director of Limpal at the moment. Diana is a researcher, teacher, and feminist intersectional activist. Whereas Annie is the president of WILF DRC and has been an activist for over 25 years. And she has been a gender and development consultant. She is the member of Advisory Council of UN Women in DRC and have led a number of grassroots women-led processes in DRC, including around Resolution on 1325 and sexual violence. So Diana and Annie, not sure if Annie is, I saw her on the list, so if someone can spotlight her. So we wanted to leave you with, Annie, based on your experiences in DRC with, work that you have been doing, and those working with men and boys in gender equality, what have been your experience? What challenges are there, and how you envision to sort of address them? And similar to Diana as well, how have you observed this in the context of Colombia, and what has been your experience? So we'll leave you two for the conversation. Over to you. While we wait for Annie, Diana, why don't you start?
Buenos días, tardes, noches a todos. Bueno, para nosotros es un gran placer poder estar en este panel, sobre todo pues con tantas compañeras que a nivel mundial estamos transformando y haciéndole grietas a este sistema patriarcal. Nosotras, creo que Ani ya se escucha en la sala. Nosotros en Colombia básicamente tenemos un desafío enorme, y es que a pesar de que el movimiento feminista ha venido avanzando y el movimiento de mujeres ha avanzado en su agenda política, la relación con los movimientos o con los grupos, organizaciones que trabajan con hombres directamente, pues ha sido un poco más lejana. Obviamente esto se debe también a todo el proceso que hemos tenido de guerra, a las dificultades de poder enlazar nuestras agendas, pero yo creo que poco a poco, y con Men Engage ha sido una de las experiencias que hemos tenido, al igual que con otro grupo con el que trabajamos de hombres objetores de conciencia al servicio militar y a las prácticas militaristas. Esta ha sido una relación que se ha empezado a formar a partir de la cordialidad y del respeto por el trabajo, pero sobre todo a partir del reconocimiento de la historia que tenemos las mujeres en este trabajo por la construcción de paz, ¿no? Especialmente porque no es que un día las mujeres nos levantamos y dijimos vamos a estar en favor de la paz, sino que ha sido nuestra propia historia de vida, nuestra propia experiencia la que nos ha llevado a estar en este lugar en donde vamos por una agenda en favor de una paz, y en nuestro caso de una paz feminista, que no es lo mismo que hablar de cualquier paz. Esto ha significado para nosotras, por ejemplo, remover pues esas estructuras patriarcales, pero no solo patriarcales, sino remover también esas estructuras racistas, capitalistas, clasistas, y por supuesto pensarnos en un feminismo, en una manera de ser feministas pro paz distinto. No todas las feministas son antimilitaristas, por ejemplo. Y eso ha significado para nosotras en Colombia situarnos en un lugar distinto al discurso del movimiento feminista, ¿no? Algunas aliadas, pero otras no, otras que consideran otras maneras de hacer el camino feminista. Y eso ha significado pues para nosotras en nuestro caso, que venimos por supuesto de esta gran trilogía de WILF, de ser feministas, pacifistas y antimilitaristas, ha significado también movilizar una ciudadanía por la paz, y la ciudadanía también está compuesta por hombres. Y claro, ahí empiezan los desafíos, ¿no? Evidentemente, pensarnos en esta relación con los hombres también nos ha significado tomar una postura que nos ubica en decir, bueno, a veces hemos necesitado espacios solos para las mujeres. No llegamos aquí pensándonos en lo individual, llegamos aquí pensándonos en lo colectivo. Y esos espacios propios de las mujeres, esas apuestas políticas compartidas desde la construcción de esos espacios feministas han significado también para nosotras como mujeres pues construir juntas un lugar donde sentirnos protegidas y donde construir nuestra propia estrategia de la que hablaba Liman hace un rato, ¿no? La estrategia la hemos venido construyendo cada día. No tenemos una estrategia ya prediseñada, simplemente cada día vamos andando y vamos construyendo también y formulando esa estrategia antimilitarista. pero también ha significado que en esos espacios de reflexión hemos también repensado el mundo desde lo no binario y desde lo subalterno, y también en temas, por supuesto, de la diversidad sexual, que no es fácil, porque no todas las feministas están por lo no binario, ni están por el reconocimiento de las diversidades sexuales, y eso hay que reconocerlo. El movimiento feminista no es un movimiento perfecto, no es un movimiento políticamente acompasado todo en el mundo, y en Colombia es así. Y esa es una realidad. Desde reconocer esos vacíos nos hace más potentes y nos hace más fuertes, justamente. Y desde ese reconocimiento, pues también hemos visto que para tratar y hablar con los hombres frente a esto de las masculinidades militarizadas, no significa en ningún momento cambiar nuestra agenda política ni modificar nuestras premisas políticas. Por el contrario, significa afianzarlas muchísimo más, y significa construir con otros esa masculinidad militarizada, que no es responsabilidad de las mujeres, pero que impacta también a los hombres y a las mujeres. De construir esa masculinidad militarizada, pues por supuesto que también nos ha hecho entender que debemos transmitir un mensaje de responsabilidad. La masculinidad militarizada no se construyó simplemente porque a alguien le pareció o a las mujeres nos pareció. Se construyó porque hubo una apuesta política masculina para liderar el poder y para generar estructuras de poder y de opresión. Y eso es lo que se debe transformar. No es el hecho de que el hombre, por ser hombre, entonces ya tengo que ponerlo en un lugar, situarlo en un lugar. Justamente lo que hay que hacer es de construir esas bases, o para nosotras es de construir esas bases que han fomentado esa masculinidad militarizada, y que se refleja en todos los días, ¿no? Además, claro que entender ese diálogo con los hombres también a veces nos sitúa, bueno, también va a ser responsabilidad de las mujeres entonces de construir la violencia de los hombres. No es nuestra responsabilidad, ni va a ser nuestra responsabilidad. Por eso nuestra agenda política y nuestro mayor trabajo es con las mujeres. Sin embargo, sí es nuestra responsabilidad como feministas antimilitaristas trabajar en deconstruir esas bases y esas estructuras de poder, y también en remover todas esas prácticas culturales que nos hacen a nosotras también reproducir esas lógicas violentas. No es posible que sigamos ejerciendo el poder de la misma manera. Y a pesar de que las feministas hemos intentado en transformar el poder, todavía nos encontramos con prácticas cotidianas, incluso ante los hombres, en los que reproducimos esas lógicas de poder que tanto combatimos. Entonces creo que esos espacios nos han permitido también reflexionar sobre eso, y sobre una cosa que decía Cintia, que por supuesto nos ha llenado mucho el trabajo que hemos hecho, y es entender que el patriarcado no es estático, ni es único, ni es una sola cosa, sino que el patriarcado es moldeable, justamente muta, se permea, se entrecruza, cuestiona la experiencia de las voces de las mujeres, y que los hombres puedan entender que el patriarcado es eso y hace eso, no es una responsabilidad de las mujeres ni es nuestra labor de pedagogizar, pero sí podemos trabajar juntos y juntes para poder hacer visible cómo ese patriarcado que muta también se muestra en esos sistemas de opresión que priorizan el conocimiento masculino, que priorizan la violencia como forma de tramitar los conflictos, pero que priorizan la marginalización y la explotación, y por supuesto que están relacionadas con el imperialismo cultural, que para las feministas está marcado en la teoría de las 5 caras de opresión de Marlene John, que creo que abre también una puerta de interrelación entre el sistema patriarcal y cómo estamos luchando todos los días por posicionar una paz feminista. Yo creo que para finalizar esta primera parte quisiera decir que trabajar con los hombres y movilizar a los hombres y una postura masculina que deconstruya estas realidades, implica también despojarnos de los estereotipos y de los presupuestos sobre lo masculino y lo femenino. No para decir que naturalmente los hombres son violentos o que naturalmente las mujeres son pacifistas o pacíficas, sino para saber que es necesario remover esos patrones culturales que nos hacen ubicarnos en un lado o en otro. Y creo que para hacer eso hay que ser, como lo dijo Lehman, valientes, no solo para posicionar las agendas, sino hay que ser valientes para abrir nuestra mente en medio de un contexto que nos sigue indicando que los hombres están matando, están asesinando a muchas mujeres. Y ahí hay que ser valientes para decir, a pesar de eso, voy a generar puentes de construcción y de transformación social.
Thank you, Diana. Couldn't agree more. Absolutely to the point. Annie, would you like to jump in from your experience in DRC?
Dans le cas de la RDC, on se posait la question, pourquoi Wilf qui travaille pour la paix a compris que le pouvoir est associé à la masculinité, où nous sommes des alliés. On a commencé à travailler avec les hommes avant. Aujourd'hui, nous menons une activité avec Ménangage. Mais si Ménangage veut apporter cet apport, ils doivent intégrer dans leur approche les actions qui vont sur la paix féministe. Pour nous, la paix féministe est une approche non militarisée, non violente et non conflictuelle, une approche dépourvue de militarisation, mais qui privilège une paix que nous appelons gagnant-gagnant. Chaque société, en fonction des époques et des circonstances, édicte ses propres processus de morale ou d'éthique. En RDC, par exemple, les forces sociales et structurelles qui façonnent les masculinités militarisées se retrouvent dans nos croyances les plus profondes, nos convictions religieuses, nos héritages socio-culturels et notre relation au corps et particulièrement au sexe. La masculinité, pour nous, de manière générale, est décrite en termes de force, de puissance, de domination et de jouissance. La culture de la violence y est intériorisée et en même temps cultivée, qui reproduise et pérennise par les processus socio-culturels de validation de ce qui est bon, juste ou injuste. Tandis que les forces sociales et structurelles qui façonnent les masculinités militarisées sont des structures religieuses, des structures communautaires et même des structures institutionnelles. C'est un travail que nous faisons qui date de longues années. Nous avons eu, par exemple, dans WIF, des membres sympathisants qui sont des hommes et d'autres organisations des hommes, mais qui ne sont pas des alliés, par exemple, des Ménangages, mais des hommes qui veulent bien accompagner WIF RDC dans ce que nous faisons et surtout que nous parlons de la paix. L'expérience, par exemple, avec les organisations conduites par les hommes, les organisations des droits de l'homme, qui nous aident à avancer les lois pour l'avancement des droits des femmes. Dans la thématique femmes, paix, sécurité, nous avons une expérience qui n'a jamais posé de problème, car les questions des droits des femmes sont considérées comme questions des droits de l'homme, d'où les hommes travaillent avec nous. On essaye d'éliminer les stéréotypes et les pratiques néfastes qui discriminent les femmes. Une stratégie importante que nous utilisons, c'est le dialogue. Nous utilisons le dialogue, comme a dit Leïma, en faisant un aspect pédagogique. C'est-à-dire, nous essayons d'abord de parler aux hommes pour leur montrer que nous ne sommes pas leurs ennemis, mais nous sommes des personnes humaines communes. Je vous donne un petit exemple. Un jour, on devrait faire un plaidoyer au niveau du Parlement concernant la loi portant modalité sur les droits des femmes et de la parité. Nous sommes arrivés à la porte. La porte était fermée parce que les parlementaires hommes avaient donné l'ordre que nous ne puissions pas entrer pour déposer notre pétition. Il y avait un policier qui était gradé. J'ai appelé ces policiers en aparté pour lui poser quelques questions. J'ai demandé s'il avait des enfants. Il a répondu oui. Vous avez des filles et des garçons? Oui. Qu'est-ce que vous faites avec vos filles? Le policier a répondu, ma fille se trouve à l'université où elle est en train d'étudier le droit. Alors, je lui ai posé la question de savoir, votre fille qui est en train de faire le droit à l'université, un jour, elle sera avocate, elle pourra vous aider. Pourquoi vous l'envoyez à l'université si vous trouvez que la place de la femme doit être à la cuisine, la place de la femme, c'est pour se marier, et pourtant, vous ne gagnez pas beaucoup, mais vous faites un effort pour que votre fille puisse être à l'université. Le monsieur a pris un temps pour m'écouter, un temps de silence, et puis tout d'un coup, elle a donné l'ordre qu'on puisse ouvrir les barrières, que nous puissions entrer. Donc, nous utilisons cette stratégie de dialogue en faisant un peu de pédagogie, en prenant des exemples qui montrent aux hommes que nous sommes des personnes humaines comme eux et nous devons travailler ensemble. Mais depuis que nous menons ce projet avec Ménangage, nous avons compris qu'il y a un grand problème. C'est un problème de relevabilité. Les hommes qui nous accompagnent pour faire avancer nos droits, est-ce que ces hommes sont conscients réellement qui nous aident pour avancer nos droits? Et nous qui travaillons avec les hommes, le Ménangage par exemple, est-ce que nous comprenons réellement ce que nous attendons de ces hommes? Donc, de notre côté, on se pose la question, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour que nous puissions prendre ces préoccupations qui viennent de la relevabilité, qui doit être intériorisée. Parce que nous devons faire des alliances. Et ces alliances risquent de ne pas aboutir et nous risquons d'avoir des effets contraires si nous ne comprenons pas le sens de ces hommes et ces garçons qui doivent nous accompagner pour faire avancer nos droits. Il faut réellement une remise en question et faire intérioriser et accompagner l'action des femmes et non prendre de l'avant. Par exemple, je trouve normal que des femmes participent à la politique et aux prises de décision de mon pays pour me représenter, mais je trouve anormal que la société qui accorde le même droit aux hommes ne puisse pas accorder le même droit aux femmes. Il y a encore très peu d'élargissement de programmes pour aborder, discuter les problèmes de masculinité, ainsi qu'une attention insuffisante à la nécessité d'aborder les cultures institutionnelles. Nous souhaitons effectivement mettre fin aux inégalités entre les sexes et nous croyons que pour y parvenir, l'implication de tous est indispensable. Nous souhaitons mobiliser autant d'hommes et de garçons que possible pour qu'ils militent pour l'égalité des sexes. Mais comment obtenir des résultats tangibles où un jour nous pouvons dire oui, effectivement, nous étions à la hauteur. Donc, il faut d'abord bien comprendre la militarisation qui est un processus et qui renforce les inégalités. Et par les inégalités, nous devons comprendre les inégalités des sexes, des races sociales et des tribus même, les facteurs qui exploitent ou renforcent ces inégalités. Par exemple, quand vous parlez des cas de violences domestiques, la femme ou le bourreau accepte, même dans le cas de violences sexuelles, parfois que cette inégalité, c'est là où réside le patriarcat, et ce patriarcat affecte toujours la vie de la nation, la vie économique et la vie politique. Donc, nous menons des sensibilisations auprès des communautés et auprès des communautés religieuses qui influencent les inégalités aussi par l'influence de la soumission qui met la femme au second rang, car on trouve des pratiques et des enseignements qui subordonnent parfois la femme vis-à-vis de l'homme. Des lois qui sont discriminatoires aussi. Par exemple, les lois sur le travail, la loi sur la santé de la reproduction, le code de la famille, la loi sur la parité. Et nous essayons de mener toutes ces plaidoyers, toutes ces stratégies pour que, ensemble, entre hommes et femmes, que nous puissions marcher pour le bien de nos communautés et le bien de la population. Voilà un peu mon idée.
Yeah, thank you, Annie, for adding those amazing thoughts from your side, and absolutely, agree on, the importance that men and boys step up to take more responsibility, and even within Menenges, we, the alliance, we are quite diverse in the sense that the understanding of what it means for men and boys to be involved in this work varies quite a lot as well, and we are in the journey to further strengthen that as we move forward and within this partnership. And that's why the accountability, which we also call solidarity dialogues, is part and central to what we are trying to do together between WILF and Menenges at the moment to be able to work together, and then also sort of support women's rights and resist militarism that focus just and sort of moving towards changing social norms, and also sort of look at systems change that has been brought from the beginning. So I can see Sylvie is back, so we wanted to bring in Sylvie a few minutes to share that she wasn't able to share earlier. So Sylvie, if you are there, and if you'd like to jump into the conversation.
Yeah, so much. Maybe I'll off the video to save the internet, which is a challenge.
We can't hear you, Sylvie, again.
Can you hear me?
I hear you, Sylvie.
Can you hear me?
I hear you, yes.
Okay. No, I was saying that I have to off the camera to save the internet. I'm sorry for the challenge. We have it since yesterday. I just wanted to quickly share our experiences with men's work in Cameroon. And the first thing that I want to say is that our work with men in Cameroon is grounded on 4 key things. The first is on research, some research that we have made. The second is on some concerns that we have. The third is on some principles and some facts. I want to start by the research. In 2016 and 2017, we conducted a research on the conflicts, how the impact of conflict on women and girls. And this research was to support the Security Council Resolution 1325 NAP process in Cameroon for the government to identify priority areas. We also conducted a gender conflict analysis with our partners in Cameroon in 2019-2020. And the gender conflict analysis and the first research that I've mentioned have made us to understand that patriarchy is deeply rooted in our culture. It is believed that men do not need to lower themselves to the level of women. Men do not need to associate with women. Men are above women in all points of view. So this is one of the things. Therefore, making things very difficult. The second thing that we also discovered through the research is that although it is very clearly indicated that in Cameroon, conflict has a serious impact on women and girls, but we find that, especially with the crisis in the Northwest and Southwest and the Boko Haram, men also suffer from the conflict. Men and boys and young men are also some victims of some conflict. In the Northwest and Southwest, we have young men who are obliged, who are even killed. Some are killed because they want to be associated. They want to join the group of the armed group. But when they say no, they are either killed, they are either threatened by their peers. So we see that men are also victims of conflict. Therefore, we feel that it is a complementary exercise. Our sociocultural context makes men as independent, but it's very important to know that we need to change the patriarchal mindset if you want to move the agenda, the peace agenda forward. The other thing that our work is based on is some principle. We believe that inclusivity is critical. It's very, very important. It's about leaving no one behind. If you want to build sustainable peace, if you want to build feminist peace, we should not leave anyone behind. We need women, we need men, we need all the components of the society to be on the table. So we came to realize that in the long run, if we start pushing about the women's agenda without taking into account men's role, at one point we might need to go back and try to bring men on board. So it's very important that we catch up on time. Another principle that we believe in is equality, as simple as that. We think that equality requires that we bring everybody on the table. It's about taking the perspective of everyone, the women, the men, the boys, the old people, the people living with handicap, and so on. So equality requires that we really work with all the groups. The other principle that I want to mention is the recognition of our diversity. We have different diversity, and then this diversity should be our force, should be our strength. So if we want to build into each and everyone's diversity, we need to bring men on board. The other thing that I see is that when women suffer from gender-based violence and they are affected by conflict in any way, the whole family, the children, the men also suffer from women's suffering from gender-based violence. So the whole family entity is fragilized when women are not fit. Therefore, it is important that men and women work hand in hand to push for the agenda. And we feel that gender equality and the feminist peace that we are working for is about complementing one another. The idea here is to promote gender equality through a complementary approach between women and men. It's not women standing against men. It's how complementary are these two entities. Therefore, we feel that it's both women and men that need to work for gender equality. As Madeleine indicated in the opening, gender relation in the communities, we see that it is part of the conflict. So we should address by this gender inequality, these gender relations, by trying to look into how the men and the women can be complementary. The last thing that I want to mention and give the floor, then I'll have the opportunity to answer other questions, is the example of WILF Cameroon and the partner. From the first day we started with Cameroon, we put a lot of confidence on some men because it's very important to avoid having bias. It's true that we have this patriarchal system, but some men do really work for gender equality. And WILF Cameroon is a true testimony of that. We have men in WILF Cameroon who are pushing the agenda, and they are making our work easy on the field by engaging other men. So having other men on board is very important to change this mindset, because when we go to the community, sometimes when we women try to talk to the men, to the traditional leaders, because they are very key leaders, very important. If you want to reach to the community, you have to pass through traditional leaders. So sometimes when women talk to them, the language is not very okay because they have this bias. So building the confidence and the capacities of other men to reach out to other men in the community is critically important. And we have seen the success of that in WILF Cameroon. So I want to stop here for now and expect the question, but just saying that for us, we feel that it's about a complementary approach between men and women to push for the feminist peace. Thank you.
I'm so glad we got you back, Sylvie. That was so worth waiting for.
So glad to.
No, that was just, I mean, basically the tour de force you gave us, and the speakers as well, you've said the same sort of things. The issue of men automatically assuming superiority, and then what happens as a result of that, and the amazing work you've been doing, and the challenges there are in actually overcoming that. What I want us to do, we're going to just try to do something ridiculously ambitious, which is to have a conversation between everybody on Zoom in different countries. So watch this one. But the question we want to look at is it's not just about the individual male assuming superiority. There is an entire system which actually creates that feeling of superiority, and you've named it, from the laws to the inequalities in representation, on and on. I mean, Annie, you spoke very clearly to that. But what is it externally to that that sustains it? And with Wolf and the projects we're looking at now is to surface not just what's happening in the country, but why it's happening. So who makes a contribution to that political economy? And it is the arms trading, which supports the militarization, and is the sort of economic activities which are undertaken in countries such as extractive industries, which then provides a basis for the continuance of this male hegemony. Now, you're all working on that in some shape or form. So I wonder if we want to try and facilitate a conversation between you as to the sort of work you're doing. I'm going to come to Sylvie first in case we lose you, because I know you've done tremendous work on arms trading in particular. And then perhaps if Annie, you can talk a little bit about the extractors that you've done amazing research and reports on, so that we can get a feel for the sorts of contextual analysis that has to be made, so that we can actually do more than just trying to equalize on a very local basis. So Sylvie, if you could come in first.
Par exemple, en RDC, nous avons travaillé sur le secteur minier, où nous avons mené une enquête dans les mines artisanales pour voir un peu les violences que les femmes subissent dans l'exploitation des mines artisanales. Et nous avons compris que là, il y a un grand problème de militarisation aussi, au vrai sens du mot, parce que les femmes se retrouvent dans un carré minier où ce carré est surveillé par des hommes en armes. Et ces femmes-là perdent tous leurs droits. Par exemple, dans les environs où elles travaillent, il n'y a pas un centre de santé. Et ces femmes attrapent toutes sortes de maladies, mais elles ne savent pas se soigner. Ces femmes sont à la portée de ces militaires qui surveillent d'abord ces carrés miniers. Et ils font un travail de ce qu'on appelle le droumage, mais qui n'ont pas d'équipement pour faire ce travail de droumage. Et on comprend que les droits ne sont pas respectés, les droits fondamentaux ne sont pas respectés. Et quand nous sommes descendus sur place, elle disait, nous le faisons parce qu'on n'a pas d'autre choix. Nous devons faire nourrir la famille et nous cherchons où aller, les hommes ne travaillent pas. C'est pourquoi nous nous retrouvons dans ces carrés miniers. Mais il n'y a pas de loi qui protège ces femmes. Il n'y a pas de loi. Et quand on parle au niveau du gouvernement pour voir comment protéger ces femmes, et parfois on n'arrive pas à avoir gain de cause. Et c'est comme ça que nous continuons aussi à faire un plaidoyer pour que le gouvernement puisse reconnaître ces femmes qui travaillent dans ce qu'on peut appeler informel, mais dans un secteur qui est très dangereux, où à la longue, ces femmes attrapent peut-être des maladies, des cancers, des peaux, des cancers, où elles n'arrivent plus à avoir des enfants, deviennent stériles à cause des produits chimiques qu'ils manipulent sans protection. Donc, on fait un travail de plaidoyer et d'ailleurs, nous allons continuer cette étude pour voir comment ces femmes qui travaillent dans un secteur économique, mais qui n'ont pas de protection. Et ça, c'est aussi une forme de militarisation, parce que la militarisation ne se trouve pas seulement dans les armes, mais la militarisation se retrouve aussi dans tous les secteurs, que ce soit politique, économique, social ou culturel. Mais du point de vue économique, ces femmes qui travaillent dans ces carrières miniers retrouvent aussi des problèmes de militarisation dans leur secteur qui est économique.
Yes, maybe if I can say something after Annie, can I?
Don't hear so well, Sylvie.
Okay. No, I just wanted to, regarding that, to say that in 2015, we conducted some work in Cameroon towards the ratification of the Armed Trade Treaty. The work aimed as trying to understand how gender-based violence was fueled or not by the weapon proliferation. And we came to understand and to see that the proliferation of weapons was really one of the main causes of gender-based violence. The increase in the far north, in all the conflict regions, we could see that the fact that weapons were circulating, where it was really increasing the rate of gender-based violence in the community. So that's why we made the advocacy together with other organizations, as we always do in Cameroon, to make sure that Cameroon really ratify the Armed Trade Treaty in order to really control the flow of arms in the country. But it made us to ask ourselves a question, because we understood that it's about the war economy. Cameroon do not fabricate the weapons, not at all. But why is it that the weapons are used? Sometimes you don't even know where they are coming from. Who are selling the weapons to Cameroon? What is the agenda? In spite of all this advocacy, sensitization, weapons do continue to come in Cameroon, and they are used against women. So apart from, we feel that it's very good to do community work, but it's also really good as you are doing advocacy, as we are talking to our sister from the other part of the world, to have this joint advocacy with all these countries selling the weapons to African countries, especially to Cameroon. We are not fabricating weapons, but we are suffering from the weapons. This is one of the things. It's very important, because we do the work every day, but if the weapon continue entering in the country without us knowing. So it's about economy. No matter what we do, people have their gain, people have their interests. So it should be very important, as we are sisters, in a holistic way, to see how we can support ourselves worldwide to addressing all those countries selling weapons to Cameroon must be held accountable. I want to talk about the second thing, what Annie just mentioned, the mining industry. Just a few weeks in Cameroon, a journalist was arrested and kept in jail for a few days. Why? Because she went to the east part of the country to make a report, yes, on the mining condition there. Because in that region of the country, women work in mining zones to get gold. Of course, the conditions are horrible, and regularly people die, children die, and so on. But those women who do the work, they earn so less out of the work. So it's exploitation of women. So when people try to look into that, of course, there is what they call a shrinking space. They don't allow you to speak out. But it's very important to speak out. So this is also something which needs to be addressed. But it is dangerous, because the minute you point out that this is not correct, you are taken as somebody standing against some interest, which is very, which is not normal. So I want to maybe to summarize by saying that it's about also interrogating the war economy. It's about trying to see what are the interests, being played against all what is happening. We see what we can see, but at the end of the day, there are some interests that we cannot see and it's very important to look into that, because the weapons that are used in the war in Cameroon are not fabricated in Cameroon. But we keep saying that war should stop. Please, let's stop having this economy of work to save also the life of the people in the communities.
No, thank you, Sylvia. I think it really does exemplify what we were talking about the external structures of power and how that works, having a massive influence. And there's some really good points come up in the chat as a, resulting from particularly in the situation of Cameroon. We've had Stella and Delphine Brun pointing out that the impact of that, particularly in the Southwest, and the impact that's had on individual young men and how they are deemed to be part of militias when in fact they're just regular people, and the threats that means they're not privileged at all. Which is exactly the point that we're coming to, isn't it? I mean, it is about not saying that we have a binary, it is about looking at the impact on everybody's lives of these institutions and these structures, which are seeking to pit one against the other. But if we reposition ourselves so we're all on the same team and looking at those structures and then can undo them, then we will have a very different outcome. Laxman, you picked up a couple of questions, yes?
Yeah, there are a few questions, but before that, Deanna wanted to just come in as well. And then there is a question to also Deanna or anyone else to address. If I understand from Michelle, if I understood her intervention correctly, meaning addressing to Deanna, she was saying that she feels it is not the responsibility of Colombian feminist movement to explain feminism nor to change the mindset of men who support the patriarchy. Given this approach, what is the theory of change on dismantling the patriarchal system? So yeah, over to you, Diana, if you want to jump in the conversation.
Sí, gracias. Antes de hacer el comentario sobre la pregunta que nos hace Michelle, que es más como una aclaración, quisiera decir que a estas reflexiones que han hecho las compañeras de los diferentes lugares también permiten entender que el trabajo con los hombres en los territorios, por ejemplo, en el caso colombiano, ha pasado también por cuestionar cosas que ni siquiera los mismos hombres se han cuestionado. En los territorios donde nosotras hemos trabajado, por ejemplo, hay muchos hombres que ni siquiera se habían cuestionado el privilegio de ser hombres, ¿no? El privilegio que les da lo masculino en las relaciones de pareja, en las relaciones familiares, en sus lugares de trabajo. Y eso ha significado en muchos casos tener que retarles a hacer una revisión propia de su ser hombre en una sociedad como esta. Nosotras recientemente acabamos de hacer una cartilla para el trabajo con los hombres en los territorios, en donde justamente a través de unos retos de la vida cotidiana les invitamos a que hagan transformaciones desde las cosas más mínimas y no bajo esta premisa de la ayuda, porque creo que eso es muy importante. Los hombres no están para ayudarnos, nosotras solitas podemos hacerlo. Estamos para trabajar conjuntamente en rescatar al mundo de un mundo violento, de un sistema patriarcal violento, pero no para ayudar a las mujeres. Y en este sentido creo que retar a estos hombres ha significado también pues entender que en contextos armados esos privilegios se incrementan y se exacerban de una manera exponencial, no solo por la relación de los soldados con las armas, por ejemplo, donde en los entrenamientos militares les hacen pensar en que las armas son como sus novias, sus parejas, y que no van a dejar que otro hombre les toque sus parejas, sino también porque hay una utilización de símbolos militares que han invitado a los hombres a que se sientan superiores, la utilización de prendas militares, por ejemplo, por ciudadanos que no tienen nada que ver con las fuerzas militares, simplemente para generar una superioridad en los territorios, es una cosa que hemos visto constantemente. Y en el sistema pues, militarista, que no solamente está en las comunidades, sino está en la macroestructura, también hemos visto cómo se privilegian unas vidas sobre otras, ¿no? Unas vidas que importan sobre otras que no importan. Y frente a un comentario que estaban mencionando ahora hace un momento de qué es lo que está en la base, lo que decía Madeleine, bueno, sí, pero ¿qué es lo que está en la base, ¿no? ¿Qué es lo que tenemos que remover? Pues una de esas cosas es para nosotras remover el sentido de posesión que se ha creado sobre las mujeres. Es mi mujer, y como es mi mujer, yo tengo el derecho de ejercer un montón de cosas sobre ese ser que no tiene autonomía. Incluso en países como Colombia, donde tenemos una vicepresidenta mujer, que por supuesto, y comillas, no representa las agendas feministas, hay una posesión todavía de ese sujeto femenino en la sociedad. Mientras se mantenga esto, mientras se mantenga esa superioridad masculina y esa vigilancia y esa posesión sobre los cuerpos masculinos, y mientras sigan asesinando a más mujeres a manos de hombres armados y no armados, creo que no podemos hablar de un estado de igualdad para las mujeres. Y no podemos hablar de que los hombres y las mujeres somos iguales, porque definitivamente todavía sigue siendo un mundo en el cual la vida de las mujeres sigue importando muchísimo menos que la vida de los hombres. Y por supuesto que no estamos hablando de todos los hombres de manera generalizada, hablar, como lo dije en la primera parte de la intervención, de un feminismo interseccional que reconozca los otros sistemas de opresión, nos invita también a pensar que no todos los hombres están en el mismo lugar de privilegio, sino que también los hombres racializados, los hombres empobrecidos de los países, de todos nuestros países, pues son también sujetos de opresión y son también un sujeto que debería aportar, que debería estar en nuestra mira, digamos, para la transformación social. No solamente transformamos para las mujeres. Cuando las feministas, y creo que eso es a nivel mundial, no en Colombia, cuando las feministas trabajamos por cambiar la sociedad, trabajamos no por cambiar la sociedad para las mujeres, sino para un mundo mejor. Y finalmente creo que las mujeres, los hombres que no conocen sus derechos, que no entienden las prioridades, los privilegios que tienen por el hecho de ser hombres, pero que tampoco entienden la realidad de las mujeres y no la conocen, son objetos fáciles del patriarcado. Y realmente creo que las feministas no queremos ningún ser humano al servicio de estos sistemas de opresión. Y eso, pensar en eso, es definitivamente un acto revolucionario por construir una paz feminista. Sobre el comentario la pregunta que nos hacía la compañera, creo que hay que entender solamente dos cosas para contextualizar mi afirmación, y no me refería solo al movimiento feminista en Colombia, sino generar una reflexión del movimiento feminista. Y es que el sistema patriarcal nos ha responsabilizado eternamente por la crianza de los varones. Eternamente ha dicho que somos las mujeres quienes criamos a los hombres que ahora son violentos. Eternamente ha dicho, además, que desde la casa les enseñamos a no tender la cama, a no llevar sus platos a la cocina, a lavar su ropa. Y eso ha generado una carga de responsabilidad en las mujeres. Las feministas hemos hablado de que eso no necesariamente es así, hemos hablado de la economía del cuidado y de la corresponsabilidad de los hombres en la educación de los niños y de las niñas. No podemos las mujeres del movimiento feminista asumir esa responsabilidad en cabeza de nosotras de transformar un sistema que también es responsabilidad de los varones. Y por eso estamos con Men Engage, no estamos solo nosotras, estamos trabajando con ellos porque ellos tienen la responsabilidad y porque además no podemos hablar de que prácticas, por ejemplo, como las que el sistema patriarcal nos enseña, ¿no? De tener que seducir o convencer a los hombres, ¿sí?
I'm really sorry to do this, but there's a real challenge with the interpreters and people are struggling to understand. So there are two English interpreters going at the same time. We're trying to mute one of you, but if one of you could mute yourself or could not be speaking so that we can understand what Diana is saying, and really apologizing for breaking in there, but people are really struggling to understand what's going on. So if we could just have one English interpreter interpreting for Diana now, that'd be great. Thank you. I think you're okay to go now, Diana. So sorry about the interruption.
Ok, perfecto, gracias. Solo para finalizar, creo que también el sistema patriarcal nos ha dicho que tenemos que seducir con nuestras ideas, y decir que vamos a seducir o a convencer también es replicar y reproducir esa sexualización que han hecho de las mujeres. Y creo que la agenda feminista es suficientemente rica en argumentos para posicionar nuestra agenda política que cuestione las formas de ejercer el poder económico, social, económico, cultural, sin necesidad de tener que ceder en nuestras agendas y en nuestros principios básicos. Creo que hemos logrado una potencia enorme de la voz feminista en diferentes lugares del mundo que debata y que cuestione esto, y en los países en donde todavía hay muchas dificultades para que las mujeres puedan expresar su lugar como mujeres feministas, pues ahí es donde hay que también seguir trabajando para que esto no les cueste la vida, ¿no? Como les cuesta en muchos lugares del mundo identificarse como mujeres feministas. Gracias.
Yeah, thank you, Diana, for clarifying that. Is, how do we make sure that there is a sense of responsibility among men and boys who are trying to involve in this feminism or feminist work and approaches, and do that in a way that that is informed from feminist leadership approach rather than the same putting men into pedestal kind of work, and that's not what this work is all about. So that there is a sense of responsibility from a feminist perspective on those who want to turn and start with learning, as most of you already said, listening to the lives of women and girls and understanding the soldiering that needs to happen in this heavy load of work that the feminist movement and the leaders have been doing. And that's one of the key principles for the work that we do within Meninges as well. And thank you for those who have been sort of putting in your thoughts, questions in the chat box, and its time is really running, and we are sorry. As we had thought of, we may not be able to accommodate all of your responses, but all the panelists have been looking at your comments and questions as well. So we wanted to actually bring in Cynthia and Lema quickly, maybe 1 minute each. Just we are slightly over the time now, to add in based on what was discussed, shared. Anything you would like to say to round off the conversation, and we move towards the closing.
Sure, I'll start and give Lema the last word.
Lema's not on anymore, I'm afraid.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Okay, so Cynthia.
Yeah, I was just going to say this tension between understanding the ways patriarchy works at the everyday level, that is, men shouting from cars at women walking along, or men not allowing their daughters to have continued schooling, and the big structures, the mining and the arms trade, that they're always interacting with each other, right? So we should never talk about or think about structures as if they're not made up of people. They are made of people. In fact, they depend. One of the things that we're learning is that these big structures, whether they be banking or mining or arms trade or the garment industry, they are all actually weaker than they would let us believe. And they're weaker, they're more vulnerable. And all of you have pointed this out today, right? They're weaker because they depend on us, all of us, propping up patriarchy. You take away patriarchy and you cannot produce a rifle. You take away patriarchy, these ideas, these practices, these assumptions, these relationships, you take away patriarchy and every mind would close down. So one of the energizing things about thinking about arms trade and mining and banking and the garment industry together with the Men Engage WILPF alliance in practice is to reveal how vulnerable these seemingly all-powerful structures are, because they depend on men and boys and girls and women in their everyday life, assuming inequality. So I don't mean that we're not up against great powers. We are. Mining companies are powerful. Arms traders are powerful. Senior civil servants or bureaucrats or elected politicians, they are powerful. But they're nowhere near as powerful as they would let us believe. nowhere near as powerful. So the emperor really doesn't have much clothes on, to tell you the truth. And this alliance will make that clear.
Oh, well, if we were all in a forum together, I think you'd be getting a standing ovation for that one, because that's exactly what we need to do. And I think you've answered the question just beautifully as to, why is a 105-year-old women's organization, which has been working for peace all those years, now working so closely and in total alliance with Men Engage. I think that's the answer, isn't it? So I think we do have to close, unless anyone has we've got like 2 minutes if anybody's got a burning final word they would like to make from the panelists, because you've all been so brilliant.
Could everyone applaud each other just in real time?
Yeah.
Final word for anybody, burning desire to jump.
No?
No, maybe I'll just quickly say that, talking about the case of Cameroon, I just want to say that we have seen that one of the best way of engaging men to change the mindset and engage in community work is through documentary, short film, documentary where we raise the issue of masculinities, but most importantly, where we talk about women's testimonies and experiences. Case, it's a practical approach that speaks to the men's mind and make them to really get on board. So this is a very good approach, the documentary and the testimonies that really touch the women, the men who are involved on the field, and really make it more practical than abstract, and speak to their mind and make them to really get engaged in the peace work.
Great.
Je peux conclure en disant que nous devons tous travailler pour la culture de la paix entre hommes, femmes, jeunes filles et garçons. Nous sommes obligés de marcher ensemble et de travailler pour la culture de la paix par la sensibilisation auprès des acteurs clés, la mobilisation, les plaidoyers auprès des hommes qui nous accompagnent, qui portent des lunettes genre et que nous appelons des hommes genrés. Merci.
Thank you all so very much for staying over the time, and amazing concluding words. No need to add anything from our side, just to say that thank you. And as Men Engage Alliance and WILF, we do commit to continue partnering and showcasing the fault lines of the system and bringing the weakness of the system to the fore and dismantling the system together. So with that, we continue the struggle, and we comradeship to this work, and we really look forward to be continuing learning from you all under your leadership and work together as we move forward.